Atlantic people. We honor and respect the enduring and continuing relationship between the indigenous people and this land by teaching and learning more about their history and present-day communities, and by becoming stewards of the land that we too inhabit. And this evening, we are honored to have Crystal Baker, a Narragansett tribal member, with us to formally acknowledge the land on which URI is situated. Crystal.
Asquequasanumis. That means hello, everyone, in Narragansett. I just want to say thank you to your president of your university. It's been a long time, and Narragansetts have been waiting to be acknowledged. Many students who've passed through these grounds do not know that these lands sit on the original territories of the Narragansett Niantic peoples. And it was under his presidency that he not only sought to acknowledge that, but offer to our students, to our children, tuition here to be able to attend the university for free. And we are so grateful. My daughter is a junior here at URI. I am a graduate, not under that, but my daughter is a student here at URI, and now my son is a freshman receiving whatever degrees in the past that they are choosing. And so a land acknowledgement is often when those who are not from this place are stating that they understand that they were indigenous people who were here. What I'm going to share is just a brief little history behind that and why land acknowledgements have been being established. And I'm going to do it in a way that speaks to your topic, business for the common good. Before Roger Williams crossed the waters from Plymouth Colony onto Narragansett territory, the business of the Narragansett was very different. What existed was a democratic society where communities held autonomy over their lives, industry, and economy, where their equality was not based on their gender, and their voices were respected, revered, and appreciated for the wisdom and knowledge of many generations. Both men and women's roles were respected for their distinctiveness as well as their interdependence. Roger Williams and the many Europeans who followed thereafter brought with them the business of conquest, colonization, Christianity, and capitalism, forever changing the life ways of the Narragansetts and the many surrounding indigenous communities, and shaping the way business would evolve in this nation from a communal interdependence to privatization. The land we stand on this evening is the unceded territory and ancestral homeland of my people, the once powerful nation of Narragansetts who welcomed the newcomers and helped them survive and thrive. This evening, I ask you to hear these words, hear my words, acknowledge this history, and know that we remain in this changed society. Over 300 years later, we continue to face the challenges imposed upon us of privatization, which caused the loss of lands, homes, and autonomy. But while our numbers are few, we endeavor to receive educations which will help us become home and business owners and leaders to support ourselves, our families, and to leave a legacy for the future generations of not just resilience, but thrivance. Thank you for allowing me this time this evening, and welcome to the homelands of the Narragansett.
Thank you, Crystal. Now, this colloquium celebrates the 100th anniversary of the College of Business. and the 60th anniversary of the Colloquium itself. It represents and celebrates what the Honors Colloquium does best. It delves into the major issues of our time. It also embodies the new direction that we are headed in honors education, namely, to prepare our URI students to become change agents, forces for the common good. In this daunting world, with unprecedented challenges ahead, we aim to give them the skills, the tools, the knowledge, and the will to change things for the better. Now, producing a series of this scope requires 1 or 2 years of planning and many, many campus partners. I would like to take a moment before we continue to thank especially our Colloquium coordinators, Christy Ashley, Douglas Creed, and Sarai Ergene from the College of Business. I would also like you to acknowledge the sponsors that are listed on our program, and I am delighted to see President Parlange and Mary Parlange here on the front row. I am continually heartened by your support and goodwill. Please, a round of applause for all the above. Now, I would be remiss, before I am leaving the stage, to not mention that the Day of Giving is coming up on this Thursday, the 5th. This is the University of Rhode Island's Day of Giving Back. And we recently received word of a generous Double the Impact challenge for our honors program. If we meet a $5,000 challenge in giving, thanks to the generosity of Provost Barbara Wolf, the gifts to the honors program will be matched dollar for dollar up to $5,000. So please use the QR code here or go to alumni.uri.edu. Every gift counts, even the smallest ones, and now they count twice. Your gifts would fund things like student projects, travel and social events, experiential learning experiences like transportation costs for going out on the bay to work on big data fish counting projects with the Graduate School of Oceanography. It would fund IT upgrades in our classrooms in Lippett Hall so that we can continue to keep providing students with cutting-edge learning technology, and provide faculty training in best practices in honors education to keep our students learning from the best, highly trained instructors at the university. So please, give us a hand. And finally, I would like to draw your attention to a new series of commissioned art pieces that will portray the diversity of our honors students over the years. Our first 4 portraits of honors students by URI alum and renowned artist Aganza will be unveiled at our art opening in Lippett Hall on October 18th at 4:30 p.m. We hope you join us there. And now, to introduce our speakers, Rachel Calomeni and Richard Vevers, please welcome Assistant Teaching Professor of Marketing, Alexandra Kane.
Hello. Not as tall as Carl. Thank you so much, Carl. I'm delighted to be here with all of you this evening, and so thrilled to be introducing our guests. Rachel Calomeni is the SVP Growth and Innovation at HowGood, the world's largest product sustainability database. HowGood's platform helps brands measure their environmental and social impact, as well as identify opportunities to improve sourcing practices to create products that are better for our planet. Rachel has 25 years of experience working in or alongside consumer goods companies such as Procter & Gamble and the Boehringer Ingelheim, and holds marketing and law degrees from the University of Western Sydney and an MBA from Fairfield University. Her passion for preserving our planet stems from her childhood, where she grew up in the picturesque Blue Mountains in Australia, a UNESCO World Heritage Listed site. Richard Vevers is the founder and CEO of the Ocean Agency, an ocean conservation nonprofit accelerating ocean science and conservation through big ideas, creative communication, and powerful collaboration. He is a fellow of the Explorers Club and an adjunct professor at the University of Rhode Island. He is best known for pioneering underwater 360-degree panoramic photography and taking Google Street View underwater, as well as his leading role in the Emmy Award-winning documentary Chasing Coral on Netflix, revealing the impact of climate change on coral reefs. His work has been featured in over 10,000 media articles and numerous documentaries. Before diving into ocean and coral reef conservation, Vevers first worked at some of the top London advertising agencies and then as an artist and underwater photographer. It is this background that has guided his unique creative and business thinking approach to creating impact in ocean conservation. His imagery, revealing what is happening to our oceans, has had huge global impact, and his ideas, projects, and public speaking have made him a leading voice in the fight to save coral reefs. I am also very pleased to introduce Jessica Struble, Associate Professor, Textiles, Fashion Merchandising, and Design, who will be moderating our program. Please join me in welcoming our speakers and our moderator. Without further ado, Richard Vevers to start us.
Thank you, and it's an honor to be here. I just thought I'd sort of explain the format of this. We're going to have two talks, first of all. I'm going to kick things off, and then Rachel's going to do her talk, and then we're going to have a panel discussion afterwards. But the reason why we've got these two talks is we've come at this talk from two different angles. We've titled it all The Good Life, Making the Switch to Purpose-Driven Work. But we have had a very different route to that. Equally, well, both can be really, really impactful in very different ways, and we're hoping to share some of that with you shortly. So I've come at it from the switch from corporate life into not-for-profit life. And it's a big switch. Whereas Rachel has gone from for-profit life into for-profit life, but that's purpose-driven. And both have enormous potential, and hopefully we'll communicate a little bit about that. So I'm going to kick off just with the trailer for the film that we did, the Netflix film, which is probably what we're most famous for at the Ocean Agency.
Most people stare up into space with wonder. Yet we have this almost alien world on our own planet, just teeming with life. It's a world completely out of sight and out of mind.
I have the utmost respect for corals. They're really sophisticated animals.
Coral is a fundamental part of a huge ecosystem.
They continue living as long as their environment allows them to.
There's this big heat wave that's traveling around all over the world. The coral bleaches, and what you're seeing is its skeleton underneath. It's like your body temperature changing. That's the seriousness of the issue. So we're sending two teams to put cameras down and capture this bleaching event.
The wind and the storms is really the controlling factor right now.
The wind just took us. The stern anchor didn't hold.
It's just demolished. You're working in an environment every single day that humans weren't built for. Your body is cut up, and then you open your eyes, and it's dead as far as you can see.
We don't have any time to waste if we want to have any hope.
We live at a unique moment in time where we can change history. It's not too late for coral reefs.
This has got to wake up the world.
It still freaks me out when I see myself on a big screen and hearing my voice. But I want to give you the backstory for the film and then tell you what we've been doing sort of since then. But it all started here. I was working in advertising. I'd been working in advertising for about 10 years until I had a meeting. We were discussing toilet roll and how to sell 4-ply toilet tissue. And I decided to quit. I needed to do something more useful with my life. And I decided, well, why don't I put my advertising skills and marketing skills really to create demand for something a bit more worthwhile. And that's the environment, and especially the ocean, which I was in love with. And so I set up something called the Ocean Agency. And our plan was to really provide marketing services for the ocean as the client. And so our first project was, we thought, well, let's reveal the ocean. 99.9% of people don't dive, so we need to be able to engage people with the ocean. So I came up with the idea of basically creating the Google Street View card, but underwater, and taking that technology. So we had Street View for the oceans. And that's what we did. So I went off to Google, arranged to have a partnership with Google, and we invented a camera that could basically take Google Street View underwater. And it was an epic adventure. You know, we went to about 32 different countries around the world to reveal these underwater environments. And it was on the homepage of Google. More people went virtual diving on that day than have ever been diving in history, which shows you the power of corporate collaboration. And we went to some amazing sites, from the Galapagos to the Great Barrier Reef to sites all around the world. And it's unlocked all sorts of opportunities we weren't expecting, like a virtual reality education program with Google that could reach 90 million kids with virtual reality education. But then the project took a bit of a twist, and that was when a scientist came up to me and said, we could use this technology to do what hasn't been possible up until now. And that was to do a global survey of coral reefs. There simply wasn't the funding for it, and there wasn't the opportunity to do a global survey. So that's what we did. This is the University of Queensland who teamed up with my team, and we went off to record the world's coral reefs. Now, the way we paid for that was through corporate sponsorship. There was no way of getting government grants for this work at the time, so we treated it like sports sponsorship. And we said, we'll give you a return on investment if you sponsor this program. And that's what we did. We made sure we got visuals of the expedition that would generate maximum publicity, and especially with the partnership with Google. And we achieved over 10,000 media articles and news features and documentaries, which was valued about $200 million for our sponsor. So it was about a 5-fold better return on investment than sponsoring a sports team. And that's, again, the potential of corporate collaboration. People would loan us their super yachts like this one to do the expedition, and because we were creating that media buzz around the project. And it allowed us to do science at scale. We took 1 million images of coral reefs and even developed the technology to be able to do image recognition at that scale to the same accuracy as a marine biologist, really transforming the studying of coral reefs. But that then led on to the next project. We found out that there was likely to be a heat wave that was going to impact the coral reefs. And this is an image of the Maldives when we responded there. But we had the right cameras with the right technology to put it on the front pages of newspapers. So that's what we decided to do. And we decided to be like the underwater storm chasers, chasing the heat wave around the planet and photographing it with our 360 cameras and time-lapse cameras that we developed to make sure we got it the publicity that it needed. And it really transformed coral reef conservation and awareness about this issue. When climate change warms the ocean, basically it creates these underwater heat waves. And when they hit coral reefs, which is the most biodiverse and most vulnerable ecosystem on the planet when it comes to climate change, it basically breaks down the relationship between them and their food, which they grow in their flesh. Their flesh turns clear, and you see the skeletons, which is what you're seeing in these pictures. And then it can die rapidly because the corals are starving to death. And we lost 50% of the corals on the Great Barrier Reef while we were filming between 2016 and 2017. And this was one of the cameras that we invented to do time-lapse photography to show this. So people really couldn't argue with the impact of climate change on coral reefs. And so you can now see that film on Netflix, but also on YouTube. Netflix made it available so it could get out to people without the paywall. And then finally, it led on to another project. After we'd worked so hard at raising awareness of the issues facing especially coral reefs, we decided to try and work on the solution, because there wasn't a global plan to save coral reefs. So we came up with an idea that was a bit controversial. We said there's limited money available, so we can only save 50. And we tasked the scientists to come up with a perfect portfolio of reefs to save. And that's what they did. They actually came up with an investment portfolio for coral reefs. So using investment portfolio theory, which is the algorithm that is used to pick shares, and we used it for coral reef conservation. And that was something that resonated with Michael Bloomberg. And he actually spent $93 million bolstering conservation efforts in the 50 reef locations that we identified. And it was a huge boost to coral reef conservation at the time. This was back in 2018. But it wasn't just about fundraising for coral reefs. We also wanted to try to get protection. And at the last climate conference was in Egypt. We knew that this was an opportunity. One of our 50 reef sites was a site which is arguably the least vulnerable site in the world. So if you were going to bet on one site to survive, it would be northern Egypt. And so we saw this as a huge opportunity, having the climate conference in Egypt. And we teamed up with UN Environment Programme and took Ellie Goulding out to put a spotlight on the reef during the climate conference. And it resulted in the Egyptian government announcing protection for the entire 2,000 kilometers of reef in Egypt at the conference. But for me, what gets me excited is the potential of involving business. Often business is seen as the enemy. When it's not, it is a fundamental part of the solution. So we team up with people like Accenture, who are experts in AI, to really work with the ocean scientists to be able to do monitoring of reefs at scale. So it almost becomes like healthcare for coral reefs. And we've been working with Mars, the confectionery company, that wanted to try and transform the restoration of coral reefs. This is a reef that was dynamited, one of our 50 reef sites, and it was dynamited 30 years ago as a destructive fishing practice, and reefs don't recover from that. But this is the reef today, and that was because Mars put one of their factory managers onto the issue. And rather than trying out 2 or 3 different techniques, he tried out hundreds of techniques. And then he worked with locals to bring down that cost and improve the efficiency and do it time and time and time again. And he improved the efficiency by about 10-fold. And he reduced the cost by about 10-fold in the same process, really revolutionizing the restoration of coral reefs. And to be honest, that's what gets me excited, is this potential for using business power to affect global change. And I do believe we can start getting ahead of the issues now with AI and other technology that's coming through to really allow us to plan in a business sense how to save these environments. So thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Hi, I'm Rachel Calomeni. I'm the Senior Vice President of Growth and Innovation at HowGood, the world's largest food sustainability database. My story is not quite as grand and impressive as Richard's. I haven't made a famous film. I haven't got beautiful slides to show you, so bear with me here. But I have made a very important career change. And I think that tonight I'm hoping to be able to show you that no matter what your skill set is, you can do differently. You can do different things to help people and the planet. So to give you an understanding of where I am today, I want to take you all the way back to 2003. Yes, a very long time ago. I'd recently wrapped up my law degree and was working for Duracell Australia, part of the Gillette Group back then. I'd been promoted and I was feeling really proud about where I was in life. My self-worth was very much tied to my career. Long hours and getting results was extremely important to me. And that day, after much work, I was offered a training assignment in the global headquarters of Duracell in Connecticut. I vividly remember walking out of the office late that night. I was dressed in my favorite blue suit, and the wind was blowing on my face, and I felt incredibly proud of what I had accomplished. People from all over the world, Gillette offices all over the world, had competed for that spot, and I had won it. I had earned it. So 20 years ago, I moved from Australia to Connecticut, where I didn't know anybody, and continued to work hard. I did my MBA at night at Fairfield University, which is where I met Professor Ashley, and I worked for big corporate. I was fortunate enough to travel all over the world on business class and got to see some amazing places. I really did love my job. I thought that success was climbing that corporate ladder, but after a total of 14 years with Procter & Gamble, as it then was, it was suggested that my next move was to be in Cincinnati. And I said no, and I went to try something new. So I decided to give pharmaceutical a go. Well, I was quickly disillusioned by a mindset that put profits before people. We were meant to be helping those people, but everything that I did every day was about making money for somebody rather than helping people. And I was really miserable for a total of 2 years. Then I switched to ad tech. Like Richard, advertising is an interesting world, let's put it that way. I was making a lot of money, but it's really, really seedy in advertising. For me, the lowest point of my advertising career was when I had to take a bunch of people who I really didn't know out and get them drunk. And the goal of getting them drunk was essentially for them to spend money with my company. I wasn't selling a vision. I wasn't selling a purpose. I was selling ad spend. It didn't feel so good to me. So I'd go back to Australia every now and then, and the country was in a terrible drought. I remember one night I drove back to see my parents' house in the Blue Mountains on a road where a bushfire had gone through. There were still smouldering embers on both sides of the road. It was a really scary and eye-opening experience. Over the next 10 years, I ran sales teams and worked with data. And yes, I worked hard and got great results. I even helped to sell a company. The money was great, I will admit that. I enjoyed the money part, but I wasn't fulfilled. And there is more to life than just money. Then in 2017, I made my daughter, who was sick at the time, watch a show with me. And that show was Chasing Coral. Sound familiar? Yep, it's the one that Richard made. Now, I'm almost embarrassed, very actually embarrassed, especially after your slides, because this was not my best social media post, but I did go back and find it. You can see August 4, 2017. I posted, Netflix, Chasing Coral, watch it. So sad, we need change. It made my daughter cry. But that program had a lasting impact on me, and actually on my daughter as well, so thank you, Richard. We agreed that we needed to do better. Fast forward to 2022, the world was changing. COVID-19, we all know what happened through COVID, and especially what was happening to the world's food supply. Also, with Russia invading Ukraine, there was massive food shortages, and there was an issue with food security in many parts of the world. We have drought, we have floods, and we have fire. It's not all bad news, but we have all this going on. We have killed our soil through the use of pesticides and herbicides. We are now reliant mainly on 3 companies, including Monsanto, for the seeds that grow the majority of our food crops. That name might sound familiar to you. The people that we're getting our seeds from are the same people who are giving us the chemicals that we use in farming, the chemicals that are damaging our soil. So at the start of 2022, I joined HowGood. HowGood is the world's largest food sustainability platform. We do 3 things. We help brands like Danone and General Mills to measure and improve their environmental impact across 8 core metrics, including carbon, but also looking at water usage, soil biodiversity, and deforestation. We help companies like Sprouts with their ESG reporting, and we help companies like Conagra or Stop & Shop uncover and validate their sustainability claims. Now, as Richard said, unlike the work he does, HowGood is a for-profit company. I'm working hard and I'm getting good results, but I get to do something better. Better for the planet and, quite honestly, better for me. I get to make a tangible difference, and that's life-changing. So my mum asks me too frequently, what is it that I actually do? And so I thought, to try and explain what I do at HowGood, I'd like you to consider a very hypothetical example. Imagine a large fast food chain, I'm not naming anybody, that might sell 2 billion burgers in a year. The production of just those burger patties emit close to 9 million metric tons of carbon each year. That's a lot of burgers, and it's a lot of carbon. If we could get that chain to switch to a 70% beef patty and a 30% mushroom patty, then we could save about 2 million tons of carbon from entering into the planet's atmosphere. To put that into perspective, that's about the equivalent of the electricity used by 500,000 US homes each year, just by changing a hamburger. So if I can get that message out there and provide strategies to both big and small CPGs, to food service providers and retailers, then I will be making a difference. At HowGood, we work with 6 of the 10 top food companies around the world. We are helping our clients to remove 98 million metric tons of carbon from the food system by 2030. And if I sound passionate about what I do now, it's because I really am. I feel incredibly fortunate to have found a new career path where it's not just about profit anymore. While profit is important, it is not the only thing that we're trying to do. We are trying to make a difference to people and planet. I needed to learn the skills that I gathered along my journey because doing good at scale, it's not easy. Big dollars are at stake, but the planet is at stake. It's possible for each of us to make a difference. We each have power. We can use our own personal agency and conviction to make an impact. And I hope that today we inspire you to think differently about your role in the bigger purpose. All right, now I think we're switching to a panel.
All right, thank you. I'll wait for you. Actually, Richard, the event's titled The Good Life. And so how good does it actually feel to have a work life that's purpose-driven?
Well, I did that sudden jump, and it was a bit of a shock to the system going from advertising money to suddenly not-for-profit, trying to do the fundraising. And it's been exhausting. The last 13 years has truly been exhausting. I think for me now it's normal, and it's just kind of the work that you do. But I think going back would now be impossible for me. I don't know how I could take on a role that wasn't doing good. And so that's really kind of the biggest outtake for me is it just becomes normal pretty quickly. But don't regret it for a second. Just one thought was, I remember leaving advertising and I looked back and I couldn't really remember hardly anything from the last 5 years. I was just living a normal life. I don't live that normal life anymore.
Thank you. Rachel, what are the biggest challenges or frustrations that you've faced or had to overcome with your purpose-driven work?
I think I'm really frustrated by the lack of change. The science is there. The science is very clear, and yet people aren't moving fast enough. So I am frustrated. We know the things that we need to do. We can measure the problem. You might not be able to change what you can't measure, but we can now measure it. It's not that hard. And so that there are tools that we know we can do to make change, and yet we're not moving fast enough. I love hearing Richard's story about how he's just gone off and done this amazing project. Most people think that they can't. Hats off to you for making that huge leap and that change. But it's frustrating to watch people who know that there's a problem, know that there is some things that we should be doing straight away, but they're not doing them. And governments aren't legislating against it. So We need more change, we need government legislation, and we need everybody to not only be outraged and disgusted with how we're treating the planet right now, but also hopeful in that, yes, we're going to do better, and it's up to every single one of us.
Thank you. Please, go ahead.
And just adding to that, on the challenge, I mean, I did this 13 years ago, and there weren't the opportunities on the business side that there are now. So I feel that I had to sort of take the hard route of going cold turkey away from business and the security that provided and everything, and then really have to be fortunate to make it a success in what we were wanting to do. A lot of not-for-profits have to follow the money, or feel that they need to follow the money. So go down routes that make it easier to do the fundraising, sort of support causes that aren't necessarily the important ones to focus on, but they're easier to fundraise for. And that's what I try to sort of avoid, which makes it even more challenging on the fundraising front. So it's just been a really tough journey. I wish I kind of had the opportunities of businesses that are doing good at my stage, because it would have made things a lot easier to make that switch.
Well, let me follow that up with another question. And this start with you, Richard. Is we have a lot of students in the audience. So, what advice would you give to someone who wants to follow a similar career path that you've taken?
Well, I think you need to think about it carefully, because you can get it very, very wrong. I see a lot of people in conservation, especially ocean conservation, who are quite frankly miserable. They're earning next to no money, they're not making any real impact, and it develops into anger. Anger at society, anger at business, anger at this and that. And it can be incredibly frustrating. And that's often because people jump into doing good without business experience, so they don't have what's needed to really make the impact. And so it just needs thinking through. So my advice is actually follow your passions and get some skills so then you can apply it. And it doesn't matter whether you're interested in fashion or food or whatever it is, follow that passion and then look to make a difference with skills and a passion.
Rachel, would you like to add to that? What would be your advice?
I think Richard really nailed it. It is finding what you are good at and developing a really good skill base. I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't spent a lot of time, doing a marketing degree, then a law degree, and then an MBA, and then spending 14 years with P&G, going through the world's, what I would call university for learning, which is on-the-job learning at a big marketing company. You get these skills, you get experience, you can understand how profit works, you can understand how consumer behavior works. You get a great grounding at a university, but it's then spending some time in a company where you get to actually feel and understand what works with consumers and how hard it is to get the funding. Just because I worked for P&G didn't mean I had a big budget to work with. I always had to prove out what money I needed for an advertising campaign or for a new product launch or even just changing packaging. So I think gaining those basic business skills, as Richard said, is critical to be able to be super successful in purpose-driven work.
So what are your predictions for purpose-driven work in the future?
Well, I think it's just going to grow exponentially. And that is because of Gen Z, I call them, Gen Z and Gen Alpha that's coming through. In my day, no one really cared about sustainability. It was, there wasn't kind of the options. And then the next generation came and, passion for sustainability and not doing harm. And then that wasn't good enough. It's now about doing good as opposed to not doing harm. Not doing harm is just kind of the basics that everyone should be doing. So you've got these generations coming through who aren't going to work for companies who aren't doing good. They're not going to invest in companies who aren't doing good. They're not going to buy from companies who aren't doing good. So the only way business can respond to that is by doing good. So I think there's just going to be huge opportunities.
How unusual is it to have two people with such an Aussie influence on the stage together, Gen Z, Gen Z? I think that we had the honor and privilege of talking to a number of students today, and the questions that came out of those discussions were amazing and thoughtful and insightful. And it makes me hopeful that the younger generation, without trying to feel like an old person, the younger generation is doing something, and they care, and they want to know how to be better. And I think that we need that at all different levels, whether it be government or politics. We need it in business. We need it through social media. We need the message to come through loud and clear that the environment matters, the people matter. And there are so many things that can be done. It's not just about saving an ocean or figuring out how much carbon is being pumped into the atmosphere or how much water is being used. We need people to look at the mental health crisis. We need to solve homelessness. There are things all over the world that we need to address, and we have the people in this room today that will make that change. While politics, I don't know, it wouldn't be for me ever, but I would highly recommend for people, younger people, to go into politics to try and make policy change. You go to the Senate and look at them. They're old, really old. And they're the people making the decisions on our behalf. We need to make sure they know what we want as consumers, as constituents, and we need to help them make that change.
Thank you. So what projects are you working on now? We saw a very impressive video. Richard, what are you doing now?
Well, I just love technology and the potential of technology. We did the project 50 Reefs, which was all about identifying regions which are least vulnerable to climate change. But you can now, using technology, find down to the meter squared the vulnerability to climate change. So you can actually use it for planning decisions. So, for example, if you're in the Red Sea, at one of the most important and valuable reefs in the world, you can say, well, what happens if we develop over here versus over here? And then use AI to work out what is the optimum way of developing that coastline so it has minimal impact, and we can look into the future to see where basically the seeds of this reef are going to land, the larvae, and resettle, and make sure we're protecting both ends. So we can start getting ahead of the climate crisis, rather than just being reacting to the problem and trying to address an issue that's always going to be beyond us. We can start planning ahead and look 20, 30 years into the future and do the work that's needed now, because the technology is there now if we invest in it.
Technology, huge. What you're doing with oceans, we can actually do around the world with deforestation. There is now technology and soon-to-be legislation in Europe, I wish the US would catch up, where it requires companies to prove that the agricultural products that they're bringing in do not cause deforestation. And there's technology that can actually, again, take satellite imagery and say, 5 years ago, was this a pristine rainforest? Yes, no. What is it now? And if your crops are coming from one of those areas, there's going to be massive fines, personal liability from board directors of a company. And while it's a very odd statement, I will say that I'm actually really excited for legislation that will be coming. Legislation is really starting in Europe, and we are a long way behind here. But there is a movement here in the US, and I'm really excited to see what comes out of it and the progress that we can make.
Yeah, and just sort of adding to that is, there's so much change happening, which is exciting because it just creates these opportunities. Looking at the model that we've done for climate change reporting with companies, and now that is going on to biodiversity and oceans. What is your impact on the oceans? And having to report that and make it public. What is your impact on biodiversity? And how can you benefit from that? So you've got something like coral reefs, which support 1 million species. And if you are responsible for damaging that, or you are responsible for restoring and protecting it, it can have massive implications on your business moving forward, because all this new legislation is coming through.
Certainly, what are you going to do? Everybody in the audience, what are you going to do? Richard is telling you that the oceans need help. There's technology that's out there. We don't even know half of it yet. So there's really cool innovation coming, and technology is going to help us to improve our planet.
And you asked the students what they're going to do, and my next question is actually about corporations. Rachel, you mentioned a couple of corporations. What are some changes in this switch to purpose-driven work have you seen with other corporations? This could be for either of you to answer.
Yeah. We watched a short video in one of the sessions this afternoon from Apple. Apple has put out a new video about their sustainability efforts, because we don't tend to believe companies that are talking about their sustainability efforts and lowering their impact. Companies are doing better than we think that they're doing. They often don't talk about it because they're worried that they'll get accused of greenwashing. But the SBTI is a place where companies, big companies especially, will report on their sustainability goals. And over 3,300 companies have actually set very public goals on reducing their impact. And you can actually go in and see what they're doing. So I think there are some amazing companies that are investing in regenerative agriculture and ensuring that they're not contributing to deforestation, also labor risk and animal welfare. Big companies. We work with Chipotle, and they allow consumers to actually understand the impact of their meals if you go onto Chipotle's real food print program. But even if you go into some Stop and Shop stores, which is, I think, a local supermarket here, you can actually choose better by going at the shelf, and they've actually got some guidance to tell you which products are better than others in a sustainability front. So,
yeah, I couldn't agree more there. And doing good is good for business. People are waking up to that. There is this big issue on companies being judged. And so it's not being as viral as it should be if people often sort of allowed companies to talk about the progress that they're making without it being bashed down. That would spark a lot more companies getting involved. And I think we need to get that balance right. Yes, keep the pressure on, but also encourage companies to be doing this work.
Especially if they can prove their numbers, right? The proof is in the pudding. Where is the data behind their reporting? If they can prove what they're doing, then we should celebrate it. Yes, they might have some bad things going on, but we as consumers are buying those products, so part of it is on us, and we need to think about that. So let's help them celebrate the good that they're doing and encourage them to continue to get better.
Thank you. Before we get to the Q&A session, parting words of wisdom for the audience.
No, I think it comes back to that. We do need people involved, but this is a unique time. There has never been an opportunity because of the amount of change going on in the world. There's never been the finance available. There's never been the technology available. There's never been such opportunity to do good and to prosper from it. And I think you just seize that opportunity, look for the opportunities, and it doesn't matter whether you're on the not-for-profit or the profit. Most of the opportunities that we have been from individuals working at big companies that have approached us saying they want us involved and working with their company. And they are the door that opens then to a huge opportunity. And it's people within companies. I think that's where the opportunity lies. It's far easier to change a company from the inside than the outside. And far too many people jump to the not-for-profit world far too easily and think they can make change there. And that's really hard to do.
I think I would say figure out what you're passionate about and figure out how to achieve success in that area. Have that North Star, figure out what you really want to do, and reevaluate that every now and then. You change over your career what's important to you, and what you're passionate about sometimes changes. When I was at the pharmaceutical company, I stuck it out for 2 years, and I really didn't enjoy more than about 2 days. But I thought I needed to stay there for my career. I think if I'd have really figured out what I wanted to do earlier and understood, sort of mapped out the skill set of what I needed to do to be better for the planet and better for people, then maybe I wouldn't have done, and followed the exact career path that I have. So I think figure out what you want to do, figure out the skills that you need and the areas that need the most attention, and then reevaluate that every now and then. You don't want to be one of these people that jumps into nonprofit and then are miserable because that's all they know, and they're unhappy because they think that the challenge is too big. We need big ideas. Innovation comes from everywhere. Innovation comes in so many forms. And so I think it's constant reevaluation and constant looking back and self-reflection to think, what do you want to do next? But get the skill set you needed in business to be able to be good at the other.
And, sorry, you sparked another idea there. It was just that just coming up with ideas and delivering those ideas is what's important. It doesn't matter whether they're successful, because your failure will spark other people who want to beat your idea. And I think we get too hung up on ego, trying to solve issues ourselves, but just by doing makes a huge difference. I often use the example of the Boyden Slat, who decided he was going to clean up the oceans of plastic by setting these kind of big nets in the middle of the ocean. We knew that wasn't going to work, but it inspired so many other rival projects, and then he got the funding that then turned into a project that would work in river mouths. And it was because he had the guts to go out there and come up with a crazy idea that sparked it all.
Okay, one more, just for fun, because we're going to do this. So I think that finding those ideas, that is great. But you mentioned this afternoon how nonprofits can be quite competitive, which is really sad. I think in agriculture and everything that I've been exposed to over the last 2 years, it's been about business people and farmers working together to share ideas. And so I think you've kind of got to figure out what you can stomach. Working for a nonprofit, hard slog, probably a lot of people vying for attention and recognition. Agriculture, honestly, it's like a big hug. Everybody wants to work together, and it's truly wonderful to see that camaraderie and I've been through that problem and here's how we solved it, which is something that you don't get everywhere. So it's choose what works for you, because what works for me probably wouldn't necessarily work for Richard, but you gotta figure that part out.
I know, and it's just that you can make such a big difference under the radar. You don't need to set up a not-for-profit. You don't need to try and get a film made or anything like that. I think of the work that you're doing, and it is making massive change, probably more than sort of what we've been able to do on the ocean conservation side, and we've been very fortunate. So it's a much harder route to go down that sort of not-for-profit route.
All right, well, thank you both. We're ready to move on to the Q&A session of the evening. So if anyone has questions, we have faculty who have microphones. Dr. Ashley and Dr. Ergenay have microphones, so just raise your hand and they will come to you. And please hold off on asking your question until you do have a microphone. And I know you have some good questions because I heard you talking at dinner.
So I was in lecture, and I was also listening to you speak, and you begin to talk about how you feel that people don't really care about the ocean, and you had to, like, not manipulate, that's not the right word, but kind of spew it in a way that get people to care. And you said that you yourself actually you weren't too fond of the ocean before. I think that's the phrasing that you used. So what made you decide to do ocean conservation then?
Well, I actually did love the ocean, but I didn't think it was that important to my life. It was just something I loved doing, and figured that would make a great career if I could make that work. And taking Google Street View underwater and being paid to go off to these amazing locations around the world seemed like a dream job, and it was. But I kind of think people have this view of the ocean, and often kind of the environment, that it is so detached. And you need to essentially market it. We have this view of the ocean from shore, and we don't understand its importance. It is the thing that controls life on the planet. It is the source of life. It controls our weather. It controls every aspect of our lives, from our wealth to our health, everything. And yet we don't teach it in schools because it's not important. In 97% of countries, it's not on the curriculum. So we need to find new ways of persuading people that it's important, and that is essentially marketing. It's getting people's gut reaction and almost having Trojan horses, as we call it, disguising the communication about the ocean so that people don't recognize it as ocean communication and don't instantly ignore it or instantly forget it, which is the current problem. And that's where sort of those marketing skills come in very handy.
We have a question down here in the front, Christy.
Okay. Would each of you be willing to name an individual and an organization that are most likely to be effective in pushing back against this massive change that you're promoting? An individual and an institution, a business, for example.
Oh, that's tricky. You're talking from a business perspective.
Well, I'll let you decide, but...
Yeah, I mean...
If I was going to say somebody, I might say Peter Thiel.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you there.
If I was going to pick up an individual, maybe Peter Thiel or Elon Musk. They have huge investments in the directions that they want to go. Some of them rather aggressive, in my opinion. Who would you identify as adversaries of the massive change that you're promoting? And an institution as well. This is not easy for marketers, right?
Who's not going to get funding?
I mean that for me, that's a really tricky question, but it's almost the names that you haven't come across yet. It's those businesses that spring out of nowhere because they're tackling this issue in a meaningful way. There's a book called The Drawdown Project, which lists what we should be prioritizing to tackle climate change. And number one is solving the refrigerant issue. So number three is solving food waste. And it's the people that come up with business ideas for solving these really massive issues and make a profit from it that I think will create that change. I can't name one individual at the moment that is driven in that way with the right solution, in my view, but I think they will be coming fairly thick and fast.
Really hesitant to answer this, but I think that it's very political, and I think climate change is not believed in by many people, which is very sad. And I think that we need to put politics aside and actually just all agree that we need to get this done and we need to solve the problem. I don't know that there's one company that's just said flat out, no, we don't want to work with you. If we think about food companies, they're all interested in taking the call. Most of them we have discussions with, and even if my solution's not right for them, we can usually find a path forward. So I don't think there's sort of the naysayers at the corporate level, but I think that we need to fix politics within the US to be able to all work together to solve what is a problem for everybody.
So one of the solutions, or I guess not solutions, like steps in the right direction that you mentioned was replacing some of the beef in the burgers with like mushrooms. And it made me think of how you were talking about the lack of education that there is. There seems to be a lack of education in terms of nutrition. I distinctly remember learning in school that protein comes from meat, and you get calcium from milk, and you don't learn about soy, you don't learn about the nutrition in nuts and things like that. Do you think that there's a way that we could push for better education to kind of set the foundation to be stronger, rather than having to teach adults. It kind of almost feels like teaching an old dog new tricks, and I think that that's part of the reason people are so reluctant to change is, like you were saying, it's been like politicized. So how can we stop the idea of saving the earth or even just teaching education on food from being a political topic?
So taking out sort of the, hey, this is an environmental thing, to, hey, this is going to help you personally and it's going to make your children healthier. I think that's a really good way of going about this. You may have heard the term regenerative agriculture, and that is essentially doing better for the soil and not only, going beyond sustainability, but actually repairing and improving the soil. Regenerative agriculture is all around nutrition. If you have good soil, you are actually growing more nutritious food. And so if we can change that messaging to talk about, hey, your kids will be healthier, you'll be able to essentially eat less and feed more people because they'll be able to get the nutrients they need. It's a really good, it's a great idea. I would encourage you to go down that path and try and figure it out. There are other countries around the world that put food labels on about nutrition. I would say that some of the science is good, some of it is a little worrisome. But if you go to some places, UK and in Europe, you'll actually find a nutrition label on the front. And rather than making it really complicated, because we know that those things are not the easiest to read and people don't really look at them, there's this sort of red, yellow, green scale that's easy to understand. And I think that that's part of it of, well, I don't know how many grams of protein or carbs or sugar, or, I don't have a degree in food science. But I think for most people, that's a really difficult concept. A red, yellow, green stoplight kind of thing, that might work for people. So I think we have baby steps to take, but nutrition is a much better way of talking about some of this for many people. And, that starts with soil health, will help nutrition, and then we go from there.
Yeah, I think you're right. We need to just overhaul the education system so it teaches people the skills that or the knowledge that they need. You can't solve the climate crisis without understanding the ocean's role, and yet we don't teach the ocean. So how do we expect people to solve these issues? How do you get healthier if you don't understand nutrition? So the basic information isn't being taught at schools. And I would love to see a big kind of movement of people demanding a better education. And I think that will be exciting if you've got some of the basics of this is what we're missing out on, and why there's a lot of issues in the world is because people who are older didn't get that education. So we can fix these problems.
All right, thank you.
I heard about the Ice Age somewhere. Hasn't the Earth been undergoing changes in the climate forever? Hasn't happened all the time? Not necessarily just now, but forever it's been changing. And didn't the dinosaurs going away for some, I imagine it was a climate issue. I don't know for sure, but yeah, what can we do? It's going to happen forever. We're going to have change, and we're going to deal with change. And I don't have confidence in government to understand where we're going and to make the rules. They want to get reelected. They're not worrying about getting elected. So what you have to do is you have to have some companies come up with products, for-profit products, or actions that will have an effect. So you don't look for government help. You don't look for free money somewhere. You find a solution or a potential solution and have these different corporations investigate these different solutions, and they'll accidentally stumble on solutions for profit that will work. Numerous failures have to happen. In engineering, I had that. Most of my projects began failure. You learn the most through failure, not success, failure. And the only one that can deal with failure is the corporate people who are willing to take that action for profit, not government interference or government understanding even where to go. But change is here forever, and I don't think you can stop the change.
Yeah, I'll just answer sort of the two parts of that question. I mean, yes, change, the planet's changing all the time, and the planet will be just fine down the track. The problem is the speed of change and the impact on people. Yeah, we're going to lose 95% of coral reefs because that changes 100 times faster than it normally changes, and corals can't adapt to that. So we know there's going to be massive changes. We need to minimize the impact on people. And I totally agree with you. Business as part of the solution is absolutely critical. If it's profitable, it's scalable. And then suddenly you get solutions quickly. So we need to be encouraging it as much as possible.
All right, we have about 1 more minute for a question.
You mentioned nonprofits following or having issues with following where the money is, and how it's unfortunate that it's a competitive market in itself. How do you navigate working with companies that are that are willing to work with the nonprofit space for like PR reasons over what they genuinely might care about, versus companies that might have less money but genuinely care about the issues that do matter?
Well, obviously, I actually prefer the companies that are doing it from the good of their heart, but a lot aren't. And yes, they want a PR story, so give them a PR story and make change that way. And that's kind of how I sort of focus on it. It's easy to understand business and what their motivations are, but they want PR, and the issue needs PR. So it's a win-win. And really just focus on delivering profit for the company can really help you get what you need from a not-for-profit basis.
I think storytelling is a really important thing here. With social media today, anybody can be a storyteller. Anybody can get that message out there. If you're compelling enough and people understand the what and the why and what action you're asking them to take, if you can get that message out there, you can make change. I think you were talking with me earlier, I can't quite see over the lights, about investment. And I think you'll find companies, if you've got a great story, they do listen. All of the big companies have innovation arms, groups that go out to find small companies that are doing good, that are doing innovative projects, and they want to invest in them. It's just finding them and making sure that you have a really clean and crisp message about your project, what you're going to deliver, and how you're going to get that change. So Richard mentioned PR. PR doesn't have to come from a big firm. It can be done through individual grassroots, social media posts and videos. I mean, the power of storytelling through videos these days is just amazing.
All right, well, thank you both very much for visiting and the presentations and the discussion, and I will turn it over to Carl.
Let's hear it for our speakers and our moderator. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Most interesting, exciting, and inspiring. Before I let you go, I would like you to please respond to a survey that is connected to this fine QR code up here. This event relies on feedback. We are constantly trying to improve and do things better, and we would very much like to hear your opinion of how things were tonight. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking the time to join us, to listen to these wonderful thinkers. Do have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
opportunity. We appreciate it.